Rishi Sunak has pledged €500 million to Macron and France in order to tackle the migrant crisis. Darren, do you think this is the right move?
Well, look, if you were to go to any business and ask them for a service, Jess, and you'd already paid them £300 million, which is, by the way, the sum of money that the British taxpayer has already sent over to France over the last decade to purportedly help tackle the unauthorised migration to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, I think you would go tell that business to go sling the hook and look elsewhere, because it's clearly not working. We had, what, almost 50,000 people come here last year. We're talking about 80,000 this year. I mean, if we're supposed to be getting results from France, I cannot really see them past all of the Albanians and others who are arriving here, primarily men, it has to be said. And I've seen a lot of writing on all of this, Jess, by the mainstream media over recent days about how battered and bruised the Anglo-French relations have been since Brexit, with much of it blamed on both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss. Now, Liz, actually, when she was in office, for all of 2 minutes, of course, but when she was in office, she actually placed a question mark around the idea that France is actually an ally of Britain. And I sort of say, Jess, I don't really care if the mainstream media don't like this view, but I'm sorry, I don't blame Liz for saying that whatsoever. Not one iota. Non français. Let's not forget, right, that it was France's Michel Barnier, as the EU's top Brexit negotiator, that threatened Northern Ireland's food supply in retaliation over UK qualms around the Northern Ireland Protocol. And it was Macron that was playing silly buggers over the idea that it's an affront that Britain should decide who can and cannot fish in its own waters, which has to be a basic right for any nation state that hasn't been taken over by some enemy territory. So it strikes me, right, that Sunak is a little bit too keen, if you ask me, to be seen to be getting on with the world's global elite. I actually think that sometimes standing up for your own domestic interests and seeking to ensure that we actually deliver for the British people is more important that you ensuring that you can hobnob with Emmanuel Macron and Mrs. Macron decked out in the latest Chanel garments. I actually worry a little bit too much about Rishi Sunak wanting to make himself look good, not with the British people, not with, those in Darlington, but actually maybe those in Davos instead. I mean, he's just been with President Biden and the Australian Prime Minister, whose name escapes me right now, Jess, but it's going to come to me any second now. His name is Prime Minister Albanese. And Prime Minister Albanese basically committed to buying UK-designed nuclear submarines. And I think that's great. Nuclear subs. Fantastic news for British engineering and for the relationship between the United Kingdom, Australia, and the United States of America. But that doesn't come at a cost of actually saying, well, to hell with Northern Ireland, because actually there are some reservations around his deal. And I think this whole Windsor framework, Jess, has been pushed through because Rishi Sunak doesn't want to upset President Biden. I mean, to hell with what doddery old Biden thinks. I care more about people in Northern Ireland getting the best possible deal for them, not receiving some kind of outcome that you would see after a negotiation from a defeated settlement in a war, right? Actually, the kinds of things that Northern Ireland was asking for, which is, frictionless trade with its own country, shouldn't be that much of a big deal. But apparently, Biden wasn't too happy about this and threatened to actually say he wouldn't come to Northern Ireland's celebrations, if you want to call it that, of 25 years of the peace process of the Belfast Agreement. So Rishi Sunak cared more about that than I think he did ultimately Northern Ireland. And they're my concerns, Jess, that actually we're basically just spaffing all of this taxpayer cash up the wall, despite the fact that over a decade now, as I say, 300 million quid we've already given them. We've committed to another £500 million. That's £500 million of your money going to the French. And I'm not convinced that this is going to see an end to the boats. France takes on far fewer asylum claims than we do. France rejects far more than we accept. We are a soft touch nation. France isn't. But do France want to keep these so-called asylum seekers in their country? Absolutely not. Because France itself recognizes that they're not escaping the bomb and the bullet. And when you're in France, you certainly ain't escaping the bomb and the bullet. You're escaping cheeses, wines, and baguettes. And I don't think those things are the product of any war, Jess. What can I say?